Recorded Books presents The Perfect Wizard, Hans Christian Andersen, by Jane Yolen, narrated by Stina Nielsen, and directed by Morgan Robinson.
Once upon a time, a baby was born on a bed that was made from a coffin platform. The bed still had the black borders of cloth at the bottom. Life and death both sleeping together. That baby was the great fairy tale writer Hans Christian Andersen, or at least such was the story he told. It was as much a fairy tale as any he ever made up. In fact, Hans was born on April 2nd, 1805, in an ordinary bed. He lived for 12 years with his parents in a tiny one-room house in Odense, a city in Denmark. A lanky child with white gold hair, Hans was very homely, even by his own account. His parents were terribly poor. His father was a shoemaker, and his mother a washerwoman. He had an older half-sister he hardly knew. His father's father was quite mad. He would wander into the woods and return singing loudly, beech leaves and garlands of flowers plaited in his hair. His father's mother incessantly told lies. Hans told lies, too, about his past life, about his present life. He called them fairy tales. "My life is a beautiful fairy tale," he wrote in his autobiography, "rich and happy." Hans grew up in a one-room house that was almost completely taken up by his father's shoemaker's bench, his parents' bed, and the couch on which little Hans slept. Often he sat in the tiny courtyard of his house under a tent made from his mother's apron. The apron stretched from a wall of the house to a broom handle. There he would stare out at the solitary gooseberry bush, daydreaming and thinking of stories. There he made puppets and also spent time cutting out clothing for his dolls. From his mother, who could not read, Hans learned folklore and superstitions. About how spring water gathered at Midsummer Eve held great power. About sticking sprigs of St. John's wort into the chinks of roof beams and checking which way they grew to see if he would have a long life. About how crossing running water would keep you safe from trolls. From his father, he learned about books. Every night his father would read aloud from the Arabian Nights, or from books of plays that sat on a shelf over the cobbler's bench. His father also made him a toy theater, which had a cord that, when pulled, changed pictures within the box. Though Hans remained superstitious for the rest of his life, it was his father's love of books and stories, of poetry and plays, that was to make the greatest lasting impression on him. Hans went to several schools. At the first school, the teacher hit him with a birch rod for making a mistake. Hans simply picked up his books and went home, never to return to that school. By the third school, he was the teacher's pet, receiving cakes and flowers from the man. But the other children did not like Hans. He had a habit of making up stories in which he always played the hero. When he told one little girl he was a nobleman and lived in a castle and that God's angels spoke to him, she told the others. They all laughed and said he was as crazy as his grandfather. Hans ran home, hid in the corner, and cried. When Hans was 7, his parents took him to see a play at the local theater. He was so thrilled by it, even though it was in German, that he decided then and there he was destined to be an actor. After that, he would sit for hours in front of a mirror with his mother's apron over his shoulders, pretending it was a knight's cloak. He would recite lines from any plays he had seen or read. He began to write things, too, and soon considered himself a digter, which is the Danish word for poet or author. Some of his neighbors thought him a pest, for he bothered all the people he knew to let him read his pieces aloud to them. Others thought he was going mad, like his grandfather. But a few thought he was, quite possibly, a genius, and they encouraged him, opening their houses to the little dicta. His beloved father fell ill when Hans was only 11.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?